How do you explain a wound that was caused by something that never happened? There was no single scene you can replay for someone. No slammed door that explains everything. No sentence that cut cleanly enough to become evidence. There was only a kind of silence where something should have been. You came home upset, and no one asked what had happened in a way that made you feel safe enough to answer. You sat at the dinner table with a whole weather system moving inside you, and the room kept talking about ordinary things. You learned to make your face normal before anyone wondered why it was not. From the outside, your childhood may have looked fine. The house functioned, people went to work, bills were paid, maybe your parents were present, responsible, even loving in the ways they knew how to be. And that is what makes childhood emotional neglect so hard to name. It is not always a story about what someone did to you. Sometimes it is the story of what no one noticed. The comfort that did not arrive when you were overwhelmed. The curiosity no one showed about your inner life. The emotional language no one helped you build. The feeling of being held, not physically, but psychologically, that somehow never became part of your world. And because nothing obviously terrible happened, you may have spent years thinking the problem must be you. Why do I feel empty when everything was fine? Why do I feel guilty for needing more? Why do I feel like other people received some instruction manual for being human that I never got? That is the deeper wound. Childhood emotional neglect does not always teach you that your feelings are bad. It teaches something quieter and more dangerous, that your feelings are not important enough to be met. So you grow up becoming very good at managing what no one helped you understand. You minimize your needs before they become visible. You turn confusion into independence. You call the ache inside you dramatic because you cannot point to the exact moment that caused it. But absence can shape a person as deeply as impact. A missing response is still a response to a child. A silence repeated long enough becomes an education. And in this video, we are going to look at the normal habits that may actually be signs of childhood emotional neglect. Not to blame your parents or rewrite your whole life as tragedy, but to give language to the space where something essential should have been. If this already feels familiar, you can comment, "Something was missing." Not to accuse anyone, just as a quiet way of saying, I finally have words for the absence. And one of the first places that absence shows up is in the way you treat your own feelings. A feeling rises, and before it can fully arrive, you are already managing it. You tell yourself it is not that serious. You decide you are overreacting. You swallow the anger before it reaches your voice, shrink the sadness before it reaches your face, and turn the need into something more acceptable before anyone has to see it. From the outside, this can look like emotional control. People may call you calm, mature, reasonable, easy to be around. But sometimes control is not peace. Sometimes it is an old reflex from a childhood where no one knew what to do with your inner world. Maybe you were not punished for crying. Maybe no one yelled when you were scared. Maybe your feelings were simply passed over, changed around, or left hanging in the room without anyone coming closer. And a child learns from that, not with words, with repetition. If no one responds when I am sad, maybe sadness is too much. If no one gets curious when I am afraid, maybe fear is something I should hide. If my needs disappear into the air, maybe I should make them smaller before they leave me embarrassed. This is the twist. Your emotions were not too much. The room around you may have been too small, too busy, or too emotionally untrained to hold them. So now, even as an adult, the feeling is judged before it is understood. And sometimes the problem goes even deeper than judging the feeling. Sometimes you cannot find it at all. Someone asks, "How do you feel about this?" And your mind goes quiet. Not because you are hiding, not because you are trying to be mysterious. The honest answer is that you do not know. There is something moving inside you, but it has no name yet. It might be grief, anger, fear, disappointment, or all of them tangled together. You can sense the pressure, but not the language. This happens because emotional language is not automatic. A child learns it when someone notices their inner world and gently reflects it back. You look sad. That scared you. You seem disappointed. Little by little, the child begins to connect the storm inside with words outside. But when no one mirrors you, the storm still comes. You just grow up without a map for it. So if you often feel too emotional and strangely numb at the same time, that is not a contradiction. It may be the result of having real feelings that were never helped into language. You are not emotionless. You were never taught how to hear yourself clearly. Once your emotions learn to stay small, your needs usually follow. You become good at not asking. Not because you never want anything, but because wanting something from another person feels like stepping into a room where the floor might disappear. You handle the problem yourself. You answer your own question before sending the message. You carry the groceries, the anxiety, the decision, the bad day, and when someone says, "Why didn't you tell me?" You almost do not know how to explain that telling never felt like relief. It felt like risk. This is one of the hidden costs of childhood emotional neglect. Self-sufficiency can look impressive from the outside, but sometimes it is just loneliness that learned how to behave. People may call you independent, low maintenance, strong, and maybe you are. But independence is different when it grows from choice than when it grows from the belief that no one will know what to do with your need. That belief does not stay contained. It often turns you into someone who is very aware of other people's feelings. You notice when a room changes before anyone says anything. A quieter voice, a delayed reply, a face that looks slightly tired, and your body begins adjusting. You become softer, easier, more helpful. You smooth the air before anyone asks you to. From the outside, this looks like kindness, and it can be, but sometimes it is also an old assignment. When no one managed your emotional world, you may have learned to manage everyone else's. If the adults were stressed, you became careful. If someone was quiet, you tried to be better. If the mood felt heavy, you scanned for what you might have done wrong. This is the deeper twist. You were not born responsible for everyone's emotions. You became the emotional regulator the adults could not be. And because that role once made the environment feel a little safer, your body kept it. Now, even as an adult, someone else's discomfort can feel like your emergency. Their sadness becomes your task. Their disappointment becomes your failure. Their silence becomes something you need to solve before it turns into distance. If this is helping you understand your patterns with less shame, take a second to like this video. And if someone came to mind while listening, share it with them. They may have been calling their self-sufficiency strength without seeing what it cost. Because the cost is not only exhaustion, it is disappearance. Your self-sufficiency impressed people, but it also taught you to vanish in small ways. You learned to be easy to love by needing less and useful to others by noticing more. You became the person who can hold a room together while quietly losing contact with your own inner life. That is why childhood emotional neglect can create adults who seem deeply caring but feel strangely alone. They are tuned to everyone else's signal, but the signal from themselves arrives faintly, like a radio station they were never taught how to find. And healing begins when you stop treating your needs like interruptions. They are not interruptions. They are evidence that you are human, and that the part of you that learned not to need may finally be asking to be met. And when the signal from yourself has been faint for long enough, another feeling begins to form. A quiet sense that something is missing. Your life may look fine from the outside. You may work, answer messages, keep relationships, pay bills, and move through the day like a person who knows how to function. Nothing is visibly broken. Nothing is dramatic enough to explain the ache. But underneath, there is a low hum you cannot quite name. It is not exactly sadness. It is not exactly loneliness. It feels more like standing in a room inside yourself and realizing something was supposed to be there before you ever arrived. This is one of the strangest effects of childhood emotional neglect. You are not grieving something you clearly lost. You are grieving something that should have been built into you and was not. A sense of being emotionally known, a sense of belonging inside your own feelings, a sense that your inner life matters enough for someone to turn toward it. Without that, many people grow up feeling different from others in a way they cannot explain. You watch how other people seem to move through life with an ease you do not have. They know when they are upset, they ask for what they need, they let someone comfort them without apologizing for needing comfort. They seem to live closer to themselves, while you feel like you are watching life from behind a thin wall of glass. And because there is no obvious event to blame, the mind often turns the mystery inward. Maybe something is wrong with me. Maybe I am missing whatever other people have. Maybe I was born with some quiet defect everyone else can sense. But that is the twist. You are not fundamentally different. You are under-equipped in a place where someone was supposed to help equip you. The gap you feel is not proof that you are broken. It may be proof that a part of your emotional development was left without enough guidance, reflection, and response. And this is where the relationship with your parents can become deeply confusing. Because they may not be villains. They may have worked hard. They may have provided. They may have loved you in the ways they understood love. They may have driven you to school, paid for what they could, stayed in the house, and genuinely believed they were doing enough. And maybe they were doing their best. But sometimes a parent's best still leaves a child emotionally unseen. That truth can be hard to hold because it does not give you a clean story. There is no easy enemy. There is only the ache of loving people, understanding their limits, and still grieving what they could not give. You do not have to choose between gratitude and grief. Both can be true. You can respect what they tried to provide and still name what was missing. You can love them and still admit that love did not always feel like being known. That is not betrayal. It is accuracy. And sometimes healing begins the moment you stop calling the gap in you a flaw and start recognizing it as a place where something essential was never mirrored back. When a gap has been mistaken for a flaw for long enough, the next habit often becomes harshness. You speak to yourself in a voice you would never use with someone you love. If a friend cannot get out of bed, you understand they are overwhelmed. If they fall behind, you remind them they are human. If they cannot explain what they feel, you would sit with them until the words arrive. But when it is you, the kindness disappears. You call yourself lazy, dramatic, weak, too sensitive, impossible, not disciplined enough. You treat your inner life with the same absence it grew up inside. Not because you are cruel by nature, because neglect can become a template. The way your feelings were handled becomes the way you learn to handle them yourself. This is why self-discipline can feel so confusing. You may look at other people and wonder how they build routines, recover from setbacks, organize their days, and keep promises to themselves without turning every failure into a verdict. But self-discipline is not just willpower. It is built on self-regulation. And self-regulation is usually learned first through co-regulation, through being helped, soothed, guided, and brought back to yourself by someone calm enough to stay. When that support is missing, the adult may blame themselves for not having skills no one helped them build. That is why the enemy was never your character. Maybe you are not lazy. Maybe you are trying to force discipline out of a system that never received enough emotional scaffolding. And then comes the grief. Not the kind with one clean memory attached to it. The kind that arrives as a quiet ache when you realize how much of your inner life you had to translate alone. The kind that appears when you imagine how different it might have felt to have someone notice the fear, name the sadness, stay with the anger, and teach you that needing a response did not make you difficult. That grief matters. It is not self-pity. It is the body finally recognizing a real loss. The loss of emotional presence. The loss of being mirrored. The loss of having your inner world met consistently enough for you to trust that it mattered. Healing begins when you stop arguing against that truth. Not by turning your whole childhood into a tragedy. Not by forcing yourself to blame people you may still love. But by naming the absence accurately enough that you can stop calling its effects your personality. Your emotions are real. Your needs are valid. Your inner life is not an inconvenience. And the part of you that learned to disappear does not need more shame. It needs response. It needs patience. It needs the emotional education that should have arrived sooner. If this video gave words to something you have carried quietly, subscribe to Cortex Psychology for more deep psychology videos about childhood wounds, emotional healing, self-worth, and the hidden patterns that shape who we become. You are not broken. You are not too much. You were undermet. The wound taught you that needing was the problem. It was not. The absence was,